Hello, I'm Dan Hill, and I will be the guest on Barron's show. I'll be talking about facial coding, why the middle of the face is the richest visual territory in the world, and how we can apply this to Donald Trump, to Mark Zuckerberg, to Jeff Bezos, and make a difference in your life by knowing what you give away and what other people read in you. Stay tuned to the show.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? What if there was a 25-inch map that every employee, every interviewee brought in with them? What would that tell you about what it is that you need to know? Would that change the way you lead? Well, stay tuned because that's what you're going to discover on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I am the Dragonist, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. To find out more, you can simply go over to dovbaron.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by the Dragon Leadership Training. It's our 2-hour live training that is now being made available to you. Imagine being in a virtual classroom where I will personally walk you through the techniques, the strategies that I've only previously offered to top CEOs, executives, high-level entrepreneurs, athletes, and entertainers. Well, now you have the opportunity to go over to dovbaron.com, click on that menu bar, and you'll simply see live 2-hour training. Click there, join us. In fact, you can get access to even the past episodes on subjects like ethical persuasion, becoming a meaning-driven leader, resilient leaderships in times of chaos, and a whole lot more. Go to dovbaron.com now and secure your seat. Also, remember that you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Just go look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And if you are a regular listener, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners over time for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, you've heard me say many times that there are two currencies that drive everything. In a world of economics, we know that one of those two currencies is certainly the dollars. The second one is what most people determine, it makes the determination about how much dollars you actually have. And I actually believe that that is emotions. I think most of you would agree that as leaders, we must drive to create satisfaction and loyalty in our team. That's the emotional side. And if we fail, it won't be long before we're out of business. So how can we do that? Well, stay tuned because that's exactly where what we're going to discover from our guest today, Dan Hill. He will be sharing his expertise and his insights that's based on facial coding. Facial coding. It's exploring why that 25 inches of territory that features the eyes, the nose, the mouth, all contain the most valuable visual information. He is the founder and president of Sensory Logic, Inc., which pioneered the use of facial coding in business. Over its 20 plus years, the company has done work with over 50% of the world's top 100 business to customers companies. Dan is the author of 8 books, including Emotionomics, fantastic, Famous Faces Decoded, and 2 Cheers for Democracy. His media appearances include ABC's Good Morning America and NBC's The Today Show. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome a man who in 2014 received the front page coverage of the New York Times for his work with professional NCAA Division I sports teams, Mr. Facial Decoder, Mr. Dan Hill. The crowd has gone wild, my friend. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Loyalty is a feeling after all, so I can't think of a better show to be on.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really honored to have you with us. Now, we always like to start our show by asking a question in this time of where everybody's an expert and everybody's an influencer. Very often, our guests are influenced by people we don't know, meaning there was somebody who had impact on you that maybe our listeners have never heard of or wouldn't think of. Who's somebody who influenced your leadership in a major way that maybe we wouldn't think of?
You probably don't hear Bob Dylan every day. I know you covered David Bowie on one of your episodes.
I did, yeah.
But there's a wonderful quote from Dylan who sings, "He who is not busy being born is busy dying." And I'm not so interested in being busy dying. So it's the thought leadership that I think he showed, got him, all of his prizes, awards, his sales. I have so admired his drive as an artist and entertainer.
I am very surprised that you went with Robert Zinnemann. Bob Dylan. I'm really surprised that you went with Bob Dylan. That's really interesting. Are you a big music guy, or was Dylan the guy for you?
No, I am a big music guy, and it doesn't hurt that he happens to be from the Iron Range, and I live in the Twin Cities area, so we're both Minnesota boys.
What is it about Dylan that had so much impact on you?
He was prepared to be an iconoclast, for one thing. He kept pushing the envelope when he left the folk music scene. I mean, he got booed in Newport. He got heckled when he went on tour in the UK, but he didn't care. He had a vision of what he wanted to do, and he didn't want to just stay with one style, and he kept pushing it, and he blended. I mean, this is someone who went from folk to country to rock. I mean, he just tried out whatever he thought fit the occasion. And there's one more thing I loved about him, innovation. One of the things he does to the session musicians when they come in, he doesn't really prep them in advance. He starts in on the piece. They got to figure out what key it's in, what kind of rhythm's going, and they've got to stay with him. So they're on edge because they've got to really, dial into this thing. And I think that keeps it fresh. And I really admire that kind of spirit.
That's awesome. I mean, for me, that's a great example of using creativity in an innovative way rather than by route. There's just to come and splash your paint on my canvas. Is a pretty cool idea. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good. So you are the world's leading facial coder for business. Please tell our audience what a facial coder is, because I am pretty sure that most people don't know.
Well, the backstory real quickly is that in 1998, someone at IBM changed my life, sent over an article from a now deceased Cornell University publication talking about the breakthroughs in brain science and indeed how much we are emotional decision makers. The statistic that really got my attention was that at least 95% of our mental activity is not fully conscious. I mean, that totally changes the game. And one of the things that changes is how are we going to access emotions? How are we going to know what's going on for people? People don't think their feelings. You can't ask them to give a rating and say, this is how I'm feeling. They don't necessarily know. And if they did know, they won't necessarily tell you the truth because we hide all the time. That's the human nature. So I started looking for a tool, and I came across the fact that Charles Darwin was the first scientist to take emotions seriously. He figured they didn't matter to us. They would have been weaned out of us over the course of evolution. And then Darwin comes to realize that in your face, you best communicate your emotions. So Darwin, not exactly available for a conversation when I started my company. Yeah, somehow just didn't work out that way.
I know you look good for your age, but really?
So there was someone else named Paul Ekman in the Bay Area, and I met with Paul. And what Paul had done over the course of about 15 years with a colleague at the School of Medicine is systematically figure out which muscle movements corresponded to which emotions. So we're talking 23 muscle movements and 7 emotions, and that's essentially the secret sauce that gets us to what are people feeling, whether they know it or not.
So let's sort of unpack that a little bit for people who don't know. Because as you and I talked about before, I love Ekman's work. I read Ekman's stuff years and years ago, did trainings around it. It's fascinating material. For those of you who saw a TV show called Lie to Me, that was based on Paul Ekman, although the character wasn't, but certainly the technology was. Ekman and that character are a little bit different, but the work is exactly that. It's reading people's faces. And if you like that show, then you begin to understand some of those facial expressions and how they work. In unpacking that a little bit, though,
Sure.
you come down to these 7 emotions, and I've actually done this experiment with people, and I say, name off emotions, and if it's a guy, it's hungry, tired, and horny, you know. So, most people are not even aware of those 7, let alone the merging of other ones into them, or the outcrops of those, because those 7 are the base, just so everybody knows. Those are the 7 base, and then they expand out from there. So this is an interesting point really in and of itself, then, because if you're reading those 7 emotions, and let's say that somebody is there in front of you, how do you have them even recognize that that's what they're showing to you? Because I know in the work that I do, I will work with somebody and I'll say, hold on, stop. What was that? And they go, what? And I go, and then I'll tell them what I saw, and they'll go, really? And I go, yeah, just go into that for a minute, and they can get there. But mostly people don't do that. So just help us out with that.
Yeah, there's 2 elements here. You've really hit on one key, which is emotional literacy, or the lack thereof. Like you, I have at conferences in some cases said to people, what are the 7 basic emotions? Or I've even put 7 up there in 7 definitions and asked them to mix and match and see if they can get it right. And the accuracy rate is about 35-40%, which is just shocking. That's all it is. And yet this is that second currency in life, along with dollars. Now you get into a situation, and I've done CEO coaching, for example. Really what I rely on is saying, this is what you're showing, and emotions are contagious. What you feel may cause them to feel similarly, vice versa. You really have to address this, and there's going to be implications to what you were giving off, what clues you're giving off. So one of my favorites, I'm sure it's one of your favorites, is contempt, because it's so toxic and so important to the relationship. So up at, not so far from you in Seattle, the Love Lab at the University of Washington, Seattle, John Gottman has used facial coding in marriage counseling. And with
number 1 predicted.
15 minutes of videotape, 90% accuracy, whether or not the couple will stay married. And contempt is the most reliable indication that it will fail. Well, what's not going to work so well in a marriage is also not going to work so well in the relationship of a CEO to, the reporter who's interviewing them, the employees they're talking to at the annual employee meeting. Contempt suggests that you don't respect and trust the other party. So it's a pretty toxic emotion. So that's one of, all of these that you can potentially go in and say, this is what you're showing. You're showing it quite a bit. This is when you're showing it. This is the implications. And you can't try to Frankenstein somebody. I mean, they're going to be who they are. But if you tell them what the implications are, I think a good CEO who's motivated will go, maybe I could up my game a little bit if I make this tweak, this adjustment, I'm more aware of this, and so on.
So you bring up something very interesting there, Dan, because, in the work that we do, it's very much based on beliefs, emotions, behaviors, etc., right? Meaning, purpose, etc. So very often, as you said, people are hiding their emotions, not because they're trying to, but because they're trained to. Therefore, they're out of touch with where they've hidden them mostly from themselves, not just from others. And even pointing out that the person is showing contempt or disgust or one of those nasties, they rarely get that, or even get how to not do that. So let's say that one of our listeners, one of our viewers goes away, says to their partner in life or at business, and says, what do you see on my face most? And let's say this person has a level of emotional literacy and says, you show a lot of disgust or contempt a lot of the time. What does that person do? Right? Because they go, okay, I didn't even know I was doing it. How do I change something I'm completely unconscious of?
Well, they may get that feedback loop, and someone says, their marriage partner or, a fellow senior executive in the company, and, it really doesn't look like you're on board with this idea of mine. And they go, really? Yeah. It's that your upper lip just flared. You just showed disgust. And disgust, of course, means bad taste, bad smell. You're backing away from something. So then, forced with that realization that this is the intuitive signal they're giving, then maybe they can go, why don't I like that? Why does that not sit comfortably with me? Why do I think that kind of, tastes poisonous to me? then I can set off the exploration. Because of course, emotional intelligence is one, vacuuming up all the clues from your environment. And the second one is, really teasing out the implications and what you can do about it. But if you're blind to the first part, it's pretty hard to get to the second.
And you brought up something there that you and I talked about last time we spoke, which I think is oftentimes missed. Emotional intelligence, for me, I'm kind of frustrated with it because it's something people have taken on, and it's something to use on others, often very poorly, with a minimal amount of understanding, and not something that most people will use on themselves. And really, facial decoding is certainly something we're externalized, we use it with, it's easier to use on others, like anything, but we actually have to do it with ourselves, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So one of the things that I've had my clients do is look at photographs. I just say, bring me a bunch of random photographs of you having a good time at parties, weddings, photos that were candidly shot of you, and then tell me what you see. Do you think that that's a good idea for a leader who is trying to understand what it is that they are flashing?
Oh, I think absolutely, because they are literally the face of the company.
That's a great point. Yeah. They are the face of, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be in the annual report, quite obviously, quite possibly on the cover. They're going to handle the PR occasions. If there's a PR crisis of enough magnitude, they're going to have to be the person on the line. And the degree to which they seem affable, trustworthy, motivated to address the issue that came up, those are the kinds of signals people are looking for. Just the other day, I came across this study, and one of the things that's disastrous for a CEO in that situation is you smile, because that's what I call being off emotion. The situation calls for being contrite. You should actually show sadness. And so the study, I'm not sure how many CEOs they looked at and how many crisis situations, but the stock performance after a PR event where they were off emotion, you're looking at about a 3.5% decline in the stock value. So I think this is a little worthwhile to investigate further.
It's fascinating because, again, a lot of people, think that smiling in chaos shows that they're confident about how to handle it. That's actually what they've been trained by some body language people. Interestingly enough, if there's no reciprocity of emotion with the people you're leading and with as you said, the stockholders, they very quickly don't trust you because they think, you are, as you said, the misalignment of your emotion to that says that you are not connected. And we can go into that in some pretty good detail. But I want to, before we do, because there's all kinds of wonderful places, delicious places we can go there.
Sure.
But before we do, let's look at this one, which is, I'm sure you've heard it. I know I've heard it 1,000 times, which is a partner of someone says, two people, and one of them says, I got a new hairdo, or I grew a beard, or I shaved a beard off, or my partner never even notices. Why do you think people don't see the most glaring communication there is? Even at the basic level, we're not talking about the level you and I like to do it.
Well, we float in our own head. We're pretty egocentric people. We don't pay good attention to the details. I mean, I always like bringing in the quote from Sherlock Holmes, who says to Watson, "You have an instinctive grasp of the obvious." I mean, that's kind of where people operate. I think one of the advantages for me in all of this is my father worked for the 3M company. And when I was 6 years old, literally on my birthday, we boarded the plane to fly to New York to take the boat to Italy. There's nothing like going to Italian first grade in a fishing village where you don't know the language, you don't know anybody, you got a lot of time in your day because the only subject you can do is math. And so you can look around at your fellow classmates, and guess what? Italians have a lot of body language. So you've got lots of things to pick on, but that really made me alert to my circumstances. And I think a good leader has to be aware, because if you don't have followers, obviously you're not much of a leader. You're not going to get the loyalty. You're not going to get the productivity. But yes, it's amazing how people go with the words. It's almost like they want to be lied to. They go with being oblivious. Because it's hard work to look at yourself and say, could I lift my game? We're shy. We hear bad news more loudly. We like to protect our own ego. We like to protect our own energy level. So we shy away from the bad news, and we need to deal with it, of course.
Yeah, we definitely do shy away from the bad news, and at the same time, we egoically are focused on it for survival reasons.
Yeah.
You know, there's equal amount of good and equal amount of bad, and people will look at the bad mostly for that simple reason, but not in themselves.
Yeah.
Only in others. But
We,
you know,
yeah.
that is no doubt about that. Let's talk a little bit about this idea that there's 25 inches of territory that features eyes, nose, mouth, etc., and all the muscles that go into there. And you say that that's the world's most valuable visual information. Tell us a little more detail around that. Let's sort of dive in a little bit on that.
Sure. Well, first of all, the most basic judgment in life is friend or foe. You know, you with me, you against me. LBJ, the former president, said, if you can't walk into the room and know who's with you and who's against you, you ain't worth spit as a politician.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely want to be picking up these effective signals. I think part of the reason why it's so important also is engagement. I mean, we know the studies that about 40% of employees are not engaged in their job. Sometimes they're actively disengaged in the job.
Absolutely.
Your emotions turn on when something matters to you. You
Right.
get revved up, you're going to do something. So it's just so important because 4 of our 5 senses, you know, are centered in the face. It's our identity, you know, facial recognition. I do, you know, motion recognition, but facial recognition is who are you? And, you know, and they're not looking at their left arm, they're looking at their face to make these determinations. It's the emblem of ourselves. But one thing I wanted to add in here is, you know, all hats off to Darwin and Paul Ekman, but the original facial coder, I would argue, was Da Vinci. Da Vinci,
Oh, of course. Yes.
Michelangelo got really fascinated with dissection. And Michelangelo's case, he went after the body, and you can see that in, like, for instance, the statue David. But in Da Vinci's case, he was interested in the face. And he actually started figuring out which muscle movements corresponded to which emotions. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Mona Lisa is such a great painting, because it is emotionally complicated and ambiguous. There's more than one emotion going on there. And it's that ability to read the situation that makes all of us better.
Thank you for that. That's, I mean, art is a big thing for me, but the ambiguity of the Mona Lisa makes her the mysterious woman. That's the nickname, right? Because you can't kind of, is she pissed off? Is she kind of happy? Is she post-orgasmic? Has she just had a nice sandwich? Does she want to tell you to go screw yourself? I mean, it's very interesting.
Would you like
that
to
he was
answer?
able to put those together in a way that is so ambiguous.
Yeah, well, in fact, I published a book on art called First Blush, People's Intuitive Reactions to Famous Art. And one of the things I did for the readers was go ahead and facially decode Mona Lisa. So we always talk about Mona Lisa's smile, but that's almost a misnomer. She also flares the upper lip in the corner. It's a smirk. It's contempt. There's anger because the lower left eye has a really straight line across it, kind of a ridge that you get when someone is angry and kind of gets that snake eyes narrowed expression. And you have a chin boss rising. That is a sign of disgust, sadness, and anger. Yes, you just modeled it well.
Yeah.
So there are all these emotions going on for her, and happiness is just a portion of it. And one of my favorite theories is why she showed anger. The model is because Da Vinci was such a perfectionist.
She would have sit there a hell of a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it took him 4 years to do the basic painting. In that same time, Michelangelo did the Sistine Chapel ceiling.
Oh, that's so funny. That's really good. You know, I never thought about Da Vinci. I mean, I've actually got pieces of Da Vinci's work in my home, and I love Da Vinci's work, and and I love the fact that I've actually cited him in a training that I'm doing in a couple of weeks, which is called eliciting creativity, and it's about inspiring people through creativity and using creativity. And I cite Da Vinci in there because he is this wonderful example of understanding that there is 2 components here, and one is the mathematical, and he was a phenomenal mathematician, and then there's the artist, and when those 2 things come together, you get innovation. I mean, the guy designed a freaking helicopter.
Yeah, no, he's amazing.
Right. So that's really fascinating. And thank you for that. That's really good. I never thought about him as the first. So I want to touch in on some of your books here. Emotionomics, Famous Faces Decoded, and 2 Cheers for Democracy. Just sort of give us a a one-liner on each of those, and then we can come back a little bit to each of them, because I mean, those are fascinating.
Emotionomics, I published in 2008. It was really to say to the world, wake up, emotions matter in business. And the reason I had to do that is think about how the workplace functions. We either show the empty smile a lot of times, or we show no emotion at all, or try to show no emotion at all, or we go to anger. And I was like, come on, that's just a complete myth. We need to fundamentally deal with the fact that whether it's the marketplace or the workplace, emotions matter. So that's that book. Famous Faces Decoded was my opportunity to say, I'm going to share the secret sauce. I mean, Paul Ekman trained me. I learned which emotions, show based on which muscle movements. And then I said, let me throw in celebrity examples, not empty celebrities like Paris Hilton, but people who actually accomplished something, whether they were, music stars, film stars, et cetera, et cetera.
Let me guess, Robert Zinnemann is in there?
He is indeed.
How did I know?
How did you know? But so it's Cary Grant and a whole bunch of other people.
Right.
So that's kind of that book where I tried to blend some insights along with the fun of knowing the backstory for a lot of people and why they might show these emotions and what are their telltale emotions. And then
before you go on that one, just,
sure.
Here's one of the things that that I find particularly fascinating, because I have a lot of friends in the body language, facial coding world, and it's interesting. 4 of them now get together and they do a behavioral decoding of famous speeches, of TV presentations, whether it's Trump or whether it's somebody speaking out against something. It's quite fascinating. But one of the things that is frustrating, because I've asked my friends about it, how do you feel about it? And they go, I'm frustrated with the ambiguity. They say, well, in this scene, he shows that he might be lying, but here he's clearly telling the truth. And there's no actual conclusion. And part of the reason is because oftentimes, as you and I know, the face flashes, but it may flash something else quite contradictory within a short period of time. And even on some of the diagrams you've got, you can see a mixed set of emotions on a face. Just talk to us a little bit about that, because that's, I think, is where most people get stuck. Like, I saw the narrowing of the brow and I thought, oh, he's a bit pissed off, but there was actually a smile that came up. So is the narrowing of the brow like he's pissed off, or is the slight smile fake, or is he kind of smiling and the narrowing of the brow is like, oh yeah, you got it. So, talk to us a little bit about that ambiguity that can show up on a face at the same time. Or
sure, no, that's a fabulous angle. One of my favorite quotes is from Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, who said, out of the twisted timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made. And it's true. We can embody our own contradictions, including on the face. So in facial coding, as you well know, so I'm speaking to the choir, but we'll speak to the viewers and listeners as well. I mean, about, roughly half of those 23 expressions go to just one emotion. For instance, when the lips press together, that's a reliable sign of anger, and it's just anger. But yes, if the eyebrows lower, that could be sadness, that could be anger, that could be fear. All of those are possibilities. So then you have to look and see, are there any other muscle movements that happen at the same time or in close conjunction? Is it maybe tilting one direction or the other? Maybe I also see the mouth pull wide, and that's fear. So now I know that the eyebrows narrowing and lowering maybe tilts a bit in the fear direction. That's a bit more what's going on for the person. But you get no absolute resolution, because this is life itself. Just like, and this is really important for listeners, there is no muscle movement that signals the person is, absolutely categorically lying. It just isn't that simple. And think about it from evolutionary terms. If we reliably gave off a signal we were lying, then that person would be dead rather quickly, would have no offspring, and we would not have liars around. And we have a lot of liars, in fact. And the reason is
just a couple of them.
Just a few. And the reality is, of course, people camouflage. That's what we do. That's a survival technique.
Yeah, and in many ways, the ability to camouflage has become, in our world at least, a pathway to success.
Oh, absolutely. And then the internet makes camouflage even easier. You say you're
a couple of filters.
You're a handsome 25-year-old man looking to date, and actually, you're 20 years older and have a paunch.
Exactly. Look at my abs. Oh, real life? We don't do real life. I'm sorry. So two cheers for democracy. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Sure. Well, we are going to have a lively presidential election here in the U.S. and leaders matter, whether it's in corporate life or running a country, for instance. So Freedom House, which a lot of people may not have heard of, but it's a nonprofit partially funded by the U.S. government that since 1973 has gone through and very carefully indexed each year what's the level of democracy in a given country across a whole bunch of indexes, the judiciary and so forth. Well, I said to myself, that's a wonderful, roadmap into who is more democratically inclined and who's more totalitarian in their instincts.
Mm-hmm.
And I can use that to go through the photographs of leaders from 73 on and see what the correlations are. And so I wanted to know effectively, because I believe in democracy, which is sometimes two cheers for democracy because it's not working.
Can't quite make the third one.
Yeah, and some days it's only one cheer, or some days it's a Bronx cheer, but I still hold on to it because I'm an optimist. But I really wanted to know are there emotional telltale signs that tell me I'm going to get someone who looks out for other people or someone who's looking out for themselves and they're going to squash dissent?
So that's very interesting, particularly in today's climate.
Yes.
As you know, because we talked about it, I'm very political. I'm observing of politics. I'm observing of geopolitics and what's going on and read a lot around those things and very focused on that. And there's no doubt that in the world of business, we have moved away from command and control. But in the world of politics, there is a rise of command and control,
Yes.
Whether that is in Turkey, whether that is in the United States, whether that is in Brazil or the Philippines. All these countries and many more have had this rise of a strong man leader who, in my opinion, is certainly more focused on their own benefits than they are of the country. Interestingly enough, people are missing the clues. I wrote a piece on Trump before he was elected and said I fully predicted that he would win. And I said, and the piece I wrote was called Decoding Trump. And it was decoding the language patterns he was using and how those language pattern works, which was repeat something 3 times, then ramble so people only remember what you repeated 3 times, then go back and repeat the same thing 3 times, and you'll install it in somebody's head, i.e. crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, ramble, 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 doesn't make any sense. Everybody's tuned out. Oh, you said crooked Hillary again, I pay attention. But there are a million things on the face that are glaring to me, and I'm sure they're even more glaring to you. Why aren't we paying attention? Why do you think we're not paying attention to, faces like Trump cannot disguise.
Indeed.
Trump is probably the easiest person to facially read. Why do you think people miss it? It's like, hold on a second. He just punched you in the face and said he has complete disgust for you, and you're cheering.
Well, one thing is the repetition, which he uses, amidst all the verbal incoherence, there is the repetition. Napoleon once said you could throw away all other rhetorical tricks. The only one I care about is repetition. I am going to hammer it home and hammer it home and hammer it home. But it overrides the visuals, at least to some people, but I think that's amazing. Now, a really important thing is besides looking at the foreign leaders in 2 Cheers for Democracy, I went through every US president ever, and I correlated it to how presidential scholars have rated them for greatness in office. Now, one really important thing here is you're looking at more than a 200-year sweep. So I had to divide the leaders into 3 tranches because obviously given technology, given improvements, so cameras and how you got photographed or painted, whether or not he had good dentistry, George Washington had 1 tooth left by the time of his 2nd inauguration. I had to, norm it by each of these different eras.
Yeah.
But overall, once I do that kind of statistical handiwork, the most reliable indicator that you were going to be a lousy president was actually sadness. And the most notable 2 people for sadness, Richard Nixon and Donald Trump. So it's true that Trump shows a lot of really intense anger, way beyond the usual spectrum, just like his words are, superlatives. He goes really high, really low when he's, defaming.
No one has ever.
Yeah.
I'm the best,
ever done this
the
before.
best ever.
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the same thing on the face. So people go for the anger, and it is there, and it's very intense. On the other hand, what's really noticeable is the grievance. This is what Mary Trump picked up on her book, that,
Yes.
about Trump is really that he never got loved by his parents. He could never get enough love in this world. He is the embodiment of the white man grievance party because he has grievances. You could give the guy, 10 Nobel Peace Prizes and he'd never be satisfied.
And I think that that's something that's really important for us to communicate to everybody listening, because I am certain, I know for sure that many of our listeners are Trump fans. And I'm not against you for being a Trump fan. I'm interested in why you are, and that's interesting. But I think it's really important to look below the surface with anybody. We could do the same with Nancy Pelosi or anybody else, or even Biden or whoever it is, that there is something below the surface. And that as you said, the anger is evident. It's easy to read. You don't have to be a decoder. You can see that. It's clear. It's pissed off about all kinds of things all the time. But that thing that you said there is something I noticed, which is this deep sadness that actually when I tap into it, it's just me, I understand. When I tap into it, I feel sad. My mirror neurons go off and I feel that. And that's one of the things about facial recognition and how that works that I think is a very big part and important part of what you do. I feel that sadness because I know it's insatiable. I can see that it's insatiable. For me, that's what I'm seeing. I'm really interested to know if you see something different or because that's not going to get solved in 4 more years.
No, it'll never be solved. No, he has the wince in the cheek. He has that, the chin razor. It is really profound and deep. So it makes a lot of sense. He's isolated. He has very few friends in life, outside of the family connections. He mostly watches TV. He's been isolated because he was a rich boy. He was a brat from the get-go. So there's just so many ways. And then he's imprisoned by his own ego.
And he was also raised by a sociopathic narcissist.
Yeah. So you just have all these layers going on for him, and there's no way he can get out of that prison at this point. That's his psychic reality. The other thing that's, of course, interesting about him, because normatively, when I looked across all these celebrities and all these presidents, the other thing that really stands out is the disgust in Trump's case. And that has to do with the fact that, first of all, he's a germaphobe. He doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink. Sex is his one vice other than his ego and pummeling people. And he also is notably against quote unquote outsiders. That includes women, since he happens to be a guy. That happens to involve Mexicans, quote unquote shithole countries in Africa. Yep. I mean, it's a really long list of people he defames. And that fits and aligns so well with disgust. So the anger is notable really for the intensity, not for the volume, because the other two emotions here, disgust and sadness, really shoehorn in on the parade, as it were.
Yeah, I want to explore more of this. So that's particularly fascinating around Trump, because not because of any, against all 4, but because he is the leader of certainly the United States and potentially the free world. There is, as you said, there is debates that are going to come up with Biden, and I'm sure you'll be paying a lot of attention to what shows up there. And there are, we're on the brink of much political change in the world, not just in America, but in the world. And a lot of that has been changed by coronavirus and moving to Zoom. We're going to end this show right here because I want you, dear listener, to understand we could spend a long, long time diving into these subjects, and facial coding and the expressions of faces and that treasure map that is 25 inches has so much value to you as a leader. So we're going to do a part 2 of this show, and I hope you'll come back into the next show. Till next time, this is Dov Baron. You can find out more about me at dovbaron.com. Now, as I said, we're here with our guest, who is Dan Hill. He is a facial coder, and he'll be back with us in part 2 of the show. So I hope that you'll stay with us for part 2 of the show. Till next time, let me just say, it's important that you realize that no matter how successful you are, if your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're working at a fraction of your capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for your organization, go to dovbaron.com, because unified meaning, or as we call it, finding your dragonfire, is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in individuals and in companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know, and we'll see you on part 2 of this show on facial coding with Dan Hill. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the emotions revealed on your face that are giving the game away. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your dragonfire to take the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.